Warning, AOC and CNN says it's now racist to say the coronavirus, COVID-19, came from China. The U.S. seeks to end its dependency on said country for a host of medicines and medical supplies, and corporate America comes down on the side of boys beating girls in girls' sports. All that and more. I'm Bobby Eberly. This is a 13-minute news hour.
And God bless the United States of America.
All right, friends, welcome to the show. Happy Friday. I hope you had a great week. It's Friday the 13th. It's my birthday, so it's going to be a good day. I hope it's a lucky day. We're going to jump in with some politics. We're going to start with coronavirus because that's the only thing people are talking about. It's shutting down the entire country. It's grinding to a halt. The entire world is over coronavirus. But one of the things, now that the media and the Democrats and the left are firmly in control of the message, guess what's popping up? It's inevitable. If the left is driving the message, you know that when it comes to conservatives, they're going to start talking about racism. Yes, even coronavirus is now bringing in a racist label because AOC and CNN say that if you talk about where it originated, you're being a racist. Even though the media has been doing that since this outbreak broke out. That's what they've been doing. But now they changed their tune, and if you talk about it, you're a racist. So let's start with AOC. She got on her Instagram Live, and she just decided, I'm going to be ridiculous. And here's what she said.
Honestly, it sounds almost so silly to say, but there's a lot of restaurants that are feeling the pain of racism, where people are literally not patroning Chinese restaurants. They're not patroning Asian restaurants because of just straight up racism around the coronavirus.
Sounds almost silly to say. Almost? Almost sounds like that? Give me a break. And then there's CNN's Jim Acosta, he's back. He's been back. He's out going after Trump. And he gave a report. He was on CNN's Chris, Don't Call Me Fredo Cuomo's show, talking about the president's speech on Wednesday night and saying how the president was basically racist in describing corona as a foreign virus. It was so bizarre. Here's the clip.
The president referred to the coronavirus as a, quote, foreign virus. That I think was interesting because as I was talking to sources earlier this evening, one of the points that the president wanted to make tonight, wanted to get across to Americans, is that this virus did not start here, but that they're dealing with it. Now, why the president would go as far as to describe it as a foreign virus, that is something we'll also be asking questions about.
Seriously? Acosta is wondering, he's stunned, why the president would refer to it as a foreign virus when it is a foreign virus? It's so bizarre. So then he talks about Stephen Miller. Acosta mentions Stephen Miller as a person likely helped write the speech for President Trump, who he describes as an immigration hardliner. And then Acosta says this.
And I think it's going to it's going to come across to a lot of Americans as smacking of xenophobia, to use that kind of term in this speech, Chris.
So it's smacking of xenophobia. That's what he says. This description, saying it's a foreign virus, it's coming from China, smacks of xenophobia, is absolutely outrageous. And it is a perfect example of how the left frames the issues. It's a perfect example. I'm reading this book right here, Rules for Defeating Radicals by my friend Chris Adamo. And I have to apologize to you, Chris. I'm a very slow reader. I'm getting through it. I absolutely love it. But it shows you step by step how the left does its attack based on Saul Alinsky's strategies. And one of the classic things is the left does not care how hypocritical or how contradictory they are with their message. They'll say one thing one time and then say the exact opposite if it suits their needs. Check out this tweet. This is CNN's Jim Acosta, who tweeted this in January. CNN International. Authorities in Beijing have canceled all large-scale Chinese New Year celebrations in an effort to contain the growing spread of Wuhan coronavirus. So wait a second. Isn't that racist? Isn't that what he just said? Isn't that xenophobic to describe it like that? This is what he just said in January. And now the left has completely changed their tune. And what about Ebola? What about West Nile? What about Lyme disease, German measles, Spanish flu? Is that all racist to describe these conditions, these diseases, from where they originated? And Acosta did the same thing. It's absolutely outrageous. Yet this is the latest leftist attacking point, and people will fall for it. They do not see through the left's agenda, their tactics, their strategies. And so I just wanted to point that out to you. So next, I want to talk about something that I hope will emerge from Corona as a good news, as a source of correction and betterment for the future. And that is ending our dependency on China for medicines and medical supplies. We do not, as America, we do not want, in general, to be dependent on a country that's a communist nation that oppresses its people, where they just disappear if they speak out, where human rights are severely limited. We don't want to be dependent on the country. And especially for medical supplies, we don't want to be dependent on a country where diseases can break out, and they often do in China, and spread around the world, and be dependent on a country that wants to take us down. They spy on us. They hack us. They do all sorts of things to try to bring the U.S. down. We don't want to be dependent on that country. And as far as medicines and medical supplies, we are gravely, frighteningly dependent on China. Here's a report from the Daily Caller. White House Director of Trade and Manufacturing Policy, Peter Navarro, confirmed Wednesday that administration is working on an executive order to eliminate the government's reliance on foreign-made medical supplies. The Buy American order comes on the heels of concerns expressed by senators during their Tuesday meeting with President Donald Trump on Capitol Hill. So what's the problem? The problem is that we are dangerously dependent on China for medicines, medical supplies, and just like with the Middle East, we talked about this for years, that we don't want to be dependent on the Middle East for oil because that controls too much of our economy and affects our national security. In the same way, we don't want to be dependent on a country like China for medicines and medical supplies when they can just cut that supply, and we are in deep trouble. And here's more from the Daily Caller. As the United States has battled the domestic spread of coronavirus, consumers were alerted to the fact that China manufactures an overwhelming percentage of the federal government's medical equipment. 90% of all U.S. antibiotics were manufactured in China. China has prevented the export of surgical face masks, severely limiting supplies in the U.S. and countries around the world. Unbelievable. 90% of all U.S. antibiotics are manufactured in China. And here's more from the Daily Caller. China has managed to dominate all aspects of the supply chain using the same unfair trade practices that it has used to dominate other sectors. Cheap sweatshop labor, tax environment regulations, and massive government subsidies, Navarro told the New York Times. As President Trump has said, we need to do is bring those jobs home so we can protect the public health and the economic national security of the country. Absolutely unreal, that dependency. And here's the other thing. Here's the other thing that bugs me about China. Goes back to what I said earlier, that they want to bring us down as a nation. They can't stand President Trump with his hard line on trade policy and standing strong against China. They'd rather have anyone in the White House other than President Trump. And now this week, Chinese officials came out and actually blamed the U.S. for coronavirus. Here's that report. Chinese officials suggested Thursday that U.S. officials introduced coronavirus into China's Wuhan region as the virus makes its way to the West from communist nation. The director of U.S. Centers for Disease Control was arrested, Lian Zhao's deputy director of China's Foreign Ministry Information Department said in a tweet suggesting Centers for Disease Control Robert Redfield was apprehended by authorities. Redfield was not arrested. Zhao went on to accuse the U.S. of starting the pandemic. Are you kidding me? This is absolutely nuts. And this is what the Chinese are saying. And this is the information minister. Talk about disinformation minister. This is what China is saying. It's absolutely outrageous. So now I want to move on from coronavirus. I want to talk about something I've covered before. And that is this whole transgender movement that pushes beyond the realm of just common sense and logic to where the left, who says they are advocates of women and girls, will allow and actually promote the idea of boys, saying they're girls, being in girl sports. It doesn't matter if the girls lose. It doesn't matter if these boys are faster, stronger, bigger. It doesn't matter. Let them compete. They beat the girls. That's okay. That's what's going on here. And corporate America is jumping on board. It's so crazy. In Alabama and Arizona, there are legislations being proposed to address hormone therapies for teenagers, kids, and this competition, this boys competing in girls' sports. And corporate America is coming out on the side of the transgender lobby, this radical, noisy, small percentage of the population. Corporate America has no spine, no backbone. They are coming out in favor of and against, actually, common sense. In favor of this lobby, against common sense. Here's a report from the Washington Times. An alliance of corporations, including AT&T, Microsoft, and Uber, backed by the nation's largest LGBTQ advocacy group, is saber-rattling against Arizona and Alabama in a bid to head off bills that would restrict transgender people in such fields as youth participation in athletics and access to medical care. Wow, that's a misleading statement right there. Business growth and innovation rely on states being open and welcoming to everyone, including the LGBTQ community, said Alfonso David, president of the DC-based Human Rights Campaign, a press statement Wednesday. Harmful legislation, such as the torrent of anti-LGBTQ bills introduced across the country, deeply affect businesses' ability to recruit and provide opportunities to their customers and employees. So first of all, that statement about medical care, that's not medical care. That's hormone therapies that will affect these kids for the rest of their lives, alter their growth, alter their development, and they call it medical care. But what are these draconian bills that Arizona and Alabama are putting forward that these big corporations decide to speak out? Here's more from the Washington Times. A bill gaining steam in Alabama State House would make it a Class C felony for doctors to prescribe hormone therapy or puberty blockers to transgender youth, punishable by up to 10 years in prison. In Arizona, the state's Republican-controlled House has passed a bill requiring a genetic test for any transgender girl, meaning a guy, seeking to play in girls' secondary school athletics. So those are the bills. That's what they're all up in arms about. And this is where corporate America falls down. Against the will of the vast majority of the American people, against the idea of common sense and logic, they'd rather side with the angry, small, vocal lobby. That's where they fall down. So finally, I got to end. This whole show could have been lumped into Relaxed Brain, but we actually have a segment. Something stood out for me this week, and it involves AOC, and it involves Fox News. So basically the question to Fox News is, do you have a relaxed brain?
I got what you call a relaxed brain.
All right, so yesterday AOC was on Fox News, and she was on Special Report with Bret Baier, and that's right there that gives me relaxed brain vibes, because they bring her on as a person of authority, as a reasonable person to speak out on issues. And that's just outrageous. The reason I cover, people ask sometimes why I cover AOC so much. One, she cracks me up. And two, I want you to be armed with information because she is one of the leading spokespeople for the far radical left. And when you talk to your friends, you talk to your colleagues, I'd like to inform you on what she's really saying so that you can counter anything that they say. But they bring her on as a reasonable person. It's just outrageous because in this interview, she's all dressed up and everything, but she talks about the need to not spread panic. Yet she talks about people losing their jobs and the elderly in danger going to be wiped out. And we need massive legislation that pays for everyone's salaries and Medicare for all and on and on. Not responsible, not reasonable. Bret Baier asked her about playing politics, and she said we need to take that out. Yet just last week, she blasted Mike Pence for chairing the task force on the coronavirus, totally playing politics. So then we get to the big one. We get to Bret Baier asking her about her support for Bernie Sanders and how it's dropping like a rock, and how she could still say, especially among the youth, that the progressive movement is really catching on when Bernie Sanders is not winning and Joe Biden is. So here's a question from Bret Baier.
You did a campaign event at the University of Michigan. You had 10,000 people. It was like a rock star status. But those kids did not show up, at least if you look at the numbers. I mean, just overall, this race. Yeah. So how can you say the progressive position is still prevailing nationwide when Joe Biden is winning so much?
All right, decent question. Here is AOC's response.
I think one thing that isn't being talked about is the rampant voter suppression in this country.
So wait a second. She's talking about voter suppression as one of the problems, but then her example is kids waiting in line too long? Is she implying that people that actually did come out to vote were somehow suppressed? She's probably going to clarify it, right? So here's what she says.
Right there in Ann Arbor, where we had that rally, those kids were waiting 3 hours in line to vote in Michigan.
Yep, that's what she meant. She meant that kids waiting in line too long is a form of voter suppression. That, back in the old days, as in recent elections, voter suppression was methods to keep people home from not voting. Now, according to AOC, they can actually come out to vote and still be suppressed because the line is too long for kids. As if there's some magical short line for those 35 and over and a longer, purposely built line for those 35 and younger that they just can't stand. They have to go home. They can't wait in that line. It's voter suppression. This is what she said. This is Fox News bringing her on. Both of them deserve relaxed brain. So, folks, I want to wrap up by saying tune in tonight, 7 p.m. I'll be on the Daily Ledger talking with Graham Ledger about politics, coronavirus, elections on One America News Network. Please tune in for that. And I hope you enjoy the weekend. I hope I have a great day. It's my birthday. And we will see you next time. Please subscribe. And when you do, please hit that bell so you'll be notified. Have a great weekend. I'm Bobby Eberle. This is a 13-minute news hour. Okay, friends, just a little reminder before you go, and no, this does not count against my 13 minutes. Please hit the subscribe button below and tell your friends. And if you happen to miss our last show, you can check it out right here. And also for great conservative news and commentary, please check out GOPUSA.com. All right, folks, we'll see you on the next show. Have a great day.